It's also going to sign up to the EU's plan for the allocation of numbers of illegal migrants across...
Something interestingly, which Keir Starmer, when we talked about that about a year or so ago, absolutely categorically denied.
In the wake of increasing tensions around immigration policies in the United Kingdom, the political landscape has been charged with a whirlwind of criticism, blame, and rising public discontent. The latest to weigh in on this contentious issue is Ben Habib, a prominent politician and businessman known for his forthright opinions and staunch stance on Brexit. His recent comments directed towards Prime Minister Keir Starmer have added fuel to an already blazing fire.
Any number of people being deported to Rwanda will have zero impact on the number of people crossing the channel because, well, first of all, we've got to remind ourselves what the Rwanda bill is. It will only deport single men to the Rwanda Treaty, it'll only deport single men.
Accusing Starmer of weak leadership and holding him responsible for the anti-immigration riots that have plagued the country. Habib's arguments tap into deep-rooted frustrations among a significant portion of the British populace, raising critical questions about the current administration's handling of immigration and broader governance issues. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Ben Habib's scathing critique of Prime Minister Keir Starmer centers around what he perceives as a failure in leadership. According to Habib, Starmer has not only failed to address the underlying issues surrounding immigration.
Good evening. A further 21 illegal migrants crossed the Channel to Britain today. That's on top of the 500 I told you about last night. The total under Labour's watch now exceeds 5,500 since they took power on July the 4th. So, despite the bluster, nothing has changed since Labour were gifted the keys to number 10. Defenders of this government will say, oh, well, it's only been 6 weeks. Come on, give them a chance.
But has also exacerbated them through indecision and ineffective policies. This criticism comes at a time when the UK is grappling with social unrest, much of which has been sparked by growing anxiety over immigration and its impact on communities. Habib argues that the riots and protests that have erupted in various parts of the country are a direct consequence of Starmer's inability to take a firm stand and implement policies that reflect the concerns of the British people.
A huge number of people who come to this country illegally will have their asylum applications processed, even though under the Tory government it was illegal for them to do so because they had arrived illegally on boats taken over from Calais.
To understand Habib's position, it is important to consider the broader context of the immigration debate in the UK. Immigration has long been a polarizing issue, with various governments struggling to strike a balance between the economic benefits of immigration and the social and cultural challenges it can pose. In recent years, the debate has intensified, fueled by the aftermath of Brexit, economic uncertainty, and global migration trends. For many, the question of immigration is not just about numbers, but about identity, security, and the future of British society.
The UK is struggling to deport over 1,000 illegal immigrants back to the countries they came from, according to government ministers. The Home Office said a backlog of over 1,000 people had formed in attempting to remove them from the UK back to countries where they had already claimed asylum. This summer has seen record numbers of illegal immigrants.
Habib taps into these anxieties, presenting himself as a voice for those who feel that their concerns have been ignored or downplayed by the current administration. One of the key points in Habib's critique is the claim that Starmer has failed to deliver on his promises regarding immigration reform. During his leadership campaign and subsequent time in office, Starmer has emphasized the need for a fair and humane immigration system, one that respects the rights of migrants while also addressing the legitimate concerns of British citizens. However, according to Habib, these promises have not translated into effective action. Instead, Starmer's approach has been characterized by ambiguity and a reluctance to make difficult decisions.
And only a few hundred this year, which means that you've got a 95% plus chance of making it through the court system and not being deported to Rwanda. And given all the trials and tribulations which you were prepared to take and risk on your way to the Channel.
This, Habib argues, has created a vacuum of leadership that has been filled by frustration and anger, manifesting in the form of riots and protests. The anti-immigration riots that have erupted in various parts of the UK are a stark reminder of the deep divisions that exist within British society. These events have been marked by violence, clashes with law enforcement, and widespread public disorder. While some have argued that these riots are the work of fringe groups seeking to exploit societal tensions, Habib contends that they are symptomatic of a much broader problem, a failure of leadership at the highest levels of government. In his view, Starmer's inability to address the root causes of public discontent
with illegal migrants.
Yeah.
Well, you don't stop the boats by deporting people. The way to stop the boats is to physically stop the boats. The reason border force is called border force is because they're meant to use force at the border. We've forgotten what border control means. Even when Rishi Sunak talks about stopping these boats,
particularly on the issue of immigration, has allowed these tensions to boil over into violence. Habib's criticism of Starmer is not limited to the issue of immigration alone. He also accuses the Prime Minister of failing to uphold the values and principles that should guide British governance. According to Habib, Starmer has lost touch with the concerns of ordinary citizens, instead focusing on appeasing a narrow segment of the political spectrum. This, he argues, has led to policies that are out of step with the realities faced by many people in the UK, particularly those in working-class communities who feel that they have been disproportionately affected by immigration and its associated challenges. Habib's argument is that effective leadership requires not only the ability to navigate complex policy issues, but also the courage to make tough decisions in the national interest, a quality he believes Starmer sorely lacks. In making his case against Starmer,
so for people who might be voting Labour as a protest vote, what are they going to get if the Labour government gets in? Because it's rather frightening.
What they will get is more of the immigration they had under the Tories, more of the taxation that they had under the Tories, more state intervention. Basically, it'll be what they've had for the last 14 years, but much, much worse.
Habib also touches on the broader issue of national identity and sovereignty, themes that have been central to the Brexit debate and continue to resonate with a significant portion of the British electorate. For many, Brexit was not just about leaving the European Union, but about reclaiming control over the country's borders and its future direction. Habib, a strong advocate for Brexit, argues that Starmer's handling of immigration policy is indicative of a broader reluctance to fully embrace the opportunities that Brexit was supposed to bring. He suggests that Starmer's approach to immigration is emblematic of a deeper ambivalence towards the idea of British sovereignty, which in turn has contributed to the erosion of public trust in the government. The issue of trust is a recurring theme in Habib's critique. He contends that Starmer's perceived failures on immigration have not only fueled public anger.
Since Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government resumed granting asylum to those fleeing war, persecution and poverty, a steady stream of migrants have risked their lives to make the treacherous journey across the English Channel.
England. You have family there?
No.
Why do you want to go to England?
No, England, good.
But have also undermined confidence in the government's ability to manage other critical issues. In Habib's view, the riots are not just a reaction to immigration policy, but a manifestation of a broader crisis of confidence in the political establishment. This crisis, he argues, is rooted in a sense of betrayal, an idea that the promises made to the British people during the Brexit campaign and beyond have not been fulfilled. Habib's argument is that Starmer's leadership, or lack thereof, has exacerbated this sense of betrayal, leading to a dangerous disconnect between the government and the governed. Habib's critique also extends to the broader political class, which he accuses of being out of touch with the realities faced by ordinary Britons. He suggests that the failure to address immigration effectively is...
We have a duty of care to people who are seeking to enter our country illegally.
We have a duty of care to people drowning in the Channel, yes.
Well, we only,
do.
by the way, under international law, Article 98 of the UN Convention of Law of the Sea, we only have an obligation to save people if it's reasonable to do so.
Symptomatic of a wider malaise within the political establishment, a disconnect between politicians and the people they are supposed to represent. This, he argues, has created a fertile ground for populism and extremism as more and more people feel that their voices are not being heard within the traditional political system. In this context, the anti-immigration riots can be seen as both a symptom and a cause of the deepening divide between the political class and the public. The solution, according to Habib, lies in a fundamental shift in the approach to leadership and governance. He calls for a more decisive and courageous leadership that is willing to confront difficult issues head-on.
Interesting that Keir Starmer has touched on the issue of legal migrants coming over, taking jobs. Again, all credit to those people wanting to make a good start to their life and move overseas, but that does have an impact on those young people trying to get a start in skills and the like. But particularly on the issue of illegal migrants, Labour has pledged that migrants from safe countries are going to be processed first,
rather than sidestepping them in the hope that they will resolve themselves. This, he argues, is particularly important in the context of immigration, where the stakes are high and the consequences of inaction can be severe. Habib's vision of leadership is one that prioritizes the national interest, even when it means making unpopular decisions. He believes that this is the only way to restore public trust and address the underlying issues that have led to the current wave of unrest. One of the challenges in addressing the immigration issue, as Habib sees it, is the need to balance competing interests and values. On the one hand, there is the need to protect the rights of migrants and ensure that the UK remains a welcoming and inclusive society. On the other hand, there is the need to address the legitimate concerns of British citizens who feel that immigration has had a negative impact on their communities.
A question I ask an awful lot of people. Do you think these flights will ever get off the ground, even one of them? And will it have any impact whatsoever on deterring people from getting on dinghies in Calais?
Habib argues that Starmer has failed to strike this balance, instead adopting a position that is too focused on the former at the expense of the latter. This, he believes, has alienated many voters and contributed to the rise of populist sentiment. Habib's critique of Starmer is also informed by a broader concern about the direction in which the UK is heading. He argues that the current approach to immigration is symptomatic of a wider drift towards a more globalist, multicultural society, one that, in his view, undermines the traditional values and identity of the UK. This, he suggests, is at odds with the desires of many British citizens who feel that their country is changing in ways that are beyond their control.
Near Dunkirk, and it's breakfast time in a camp. Omar's cooking. 2 years ago, he paid smugglers $15,000 to get him from Kurdistan to Britain. But now he's come back here to cook for migrants. Omar actually paid £500 to be smuggled out of Britain. He feared being deported.
For Habib, the failure to address immigration effectively is not just a policy issue, but a fundamental question about the future of the nation. He argues that without strong leadership and a clear vision for the country's future, the UK risks losing its sense of identity and cohesion. In addition to his criticism of Starmer's leadership, Habib also offers his own vision for how the UK should approach the issue of immigration. He advocates for a more restrictive immigration policy, one that prioritizes the needs of British citizens and ensures that the benefits of immigration are shared more equitably across society. This, he argues, would help to alleviate some of the tensions that have fueled the recent riots and restore a sense of order and stability to the country.
Under the same international law, we have the right to turn people back who are seeking to enter our
I
waters
understand her.
illegally.
I love it turning
And
people
so-
back. At the point when they
Yeah.
refuse to be turned back, or they just someone just puts a knife into the dinghy and it starts deflating, or they jump into the water because they've been told that's what you do, and then you'll be picked up. You know as well as I do. Anybody who has ever been on a boat will know that the rules of the sea are very clear. You have to save life where you can save life.
Habib also calls for a more robust enforcement of immigration laws, arguing that the current system is too lax and has allowed illegal immigration to flourish. In his view, a tougher approach is necessary to restore public confidence in the government's ability to manage the country's borders. Habib's vision for immigration reform is also closely linked to his broader political philosophy, which emphasizes national sovereignty, individual responsibility, and a strong sense of community. He argues that a more controlled approach to immigration is essential to preserving these values and ensuring that the UK remains a cohesive and prosperous society. At the heart of Habib's argument is the belief that the government has a duty to protect the interests of its citizens, and that this duty should take precedence over other considerations.
That is the legalization of illegal migration through the back door, because once you've been allocated to a certain country, if you're an illegal migrant, you've been allocated to the United Kingdom. Well, that's you done.
Yeah.
You're allocated to the UK, you're settled here. So we are going to be taking instructions from the EU on the numbers of illegal migrants that we should be obliged to settle in the United Kingdom.
This, he suggests, is a principle that has been lost under Starmer's leadership, leading to policies that are out of touch with the needs and desires of the British people. While Habib's views on immigration are likely to resonate with a significant portion of the electorate, they are also highly controversial. Critics argue that his approach is overly simplistic and fails to take into account the complexities of immigration and its impact on society. They also accuse him of using inflammatory rhetoric to stoke fears and divisions, rather than offering constructive solutions to the challenges facing the UK. For many, the anti-immigration riots are a reminder of the dangers of allowing these issues to be exploited for political gain, particularly in a context as sensitive and complex as immigration. However, for supporters of Habib's perspective, these riots underscore the urgency of addressing what they see as a growing crisis.
You establish a force that's well-trained and well-equipped
Yeah.
and capable
And
of
then?
intercepting these dinghies, and you stop them entering our territorial water,
And then?
you require them to turn round.
You
And
require
if they
them to
don't
turn around. They go, we're
you-
not going to turn round, we're just going to keep
and
going.
then you have a standoff. You have a standoff in the channel.
A crisis exacerbated by what they perceive as weak and ineffective leadership from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. To further dissect Habib's critique and its implications, it is essential to explore the broader socio-political landscape in which these issues are unfolding. The UK, like many Western nations, has experienced significant demographic changes over the past few decades. These changes, driven by immigration, have brought both opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, immigrants have contributed to the economy, filled labor shortages, and enriched the cultural fabric of British society. On the other hand, these changes have also led to concerns about social cohesion, pressure on public services, and the perceived erosion of national identity. For many in the UK, particularly in areas that have seen rapid demographic change, immigration is not just an abstract policy issue, but a lived reality. It is in these communities where the tensions surrounding immigration are most palpable and where the sense of alienation and frustration is often strongest.
At first, they're simply shapes in the distance, but as we run down the beach, we see dozens of people. Men, women and children, all from Kurdistan, intent on reaching Britain. They're waiting for their ride, called a taxi boat, a smuggler's dinghy that's already picked up dozens of passengers.
Habib's arguments tap into these sentiments, portraying Starmer's government as out of touch with the concerns of ordinary Britons and unwilling or unable to address the problems that they face. This narrative is powerful because it resonates with the lived experiences of many people who feel that their voices are not being heard in the corridors of power. The riots themselves can be seen as a manifestation of this frustration. While it is important to acknowledge that not all of those who are concerned about immigration resort to violence, the fact that these riots have occurred is indicative of a deeper sense of disillusionment and anger. For Habib, these events are not just the product of isolated incidents, but the result of a long-standing failure to address the root causes of public discontent. He argues that by ignoring or downplaying the concerns of those who feel marginalized by immigration, the government has allowed these tensions to fester and ultimately erupt into violence. Habib's argument is that the leadership vacuum left by Starmer has created an environment where extremist views can flourish. In the absence of clear and decisive action from the government,
A lot of these people, a lot of the migration, the vast majority of the migration that the United Kingdom had until the last 25 years were of migrants who were genuinely aspirational, who wanted to make a better life for themselves and come to the United Kingdom because they love the UK. They bought into UK's values. They wanted to make a life here.
more radical elements within society have been able to exploit the situation for their own ends. This is a dangerous development, as it risks further polarizing the debate on immigration and making it even harder to find constructive solutions. For Habib, the answer lies in strong leadership that is willing to confront these issues head-on and take the necessary steps to restore public confidence. The question of leadership is central to Habib's critique. He argues that effective leadership is not just about making the right decisions, but also about providing a clear sense of direction and purpose. In his view,
and then all the migrants
then
jump
you use
into the
force.
water. What do you do then?
And you might, this is one idea, provide them with another dinghy in order to climb back in and
then
go
they
back
say
to
we're going to
France.
keep going to England. What do you do
And
then?
you use force again. And I'm
Use force
afraid
again. So at some point, you know, the Royal Navy or any other body about the border force, they're going to have to pick these people out of the water or off a dinghy that's not seaworthy.
Starmer has failed to do this, leaving the country adrift at a time when it most needs strong and decisive leadership. This failure, he argues, has had far-reaching consequences, not only in terms of immigration policy, but also in terms of the broader governance of the country. Habib's contention is that without strong leadership, the UK cannot hope to navigate the complex challenges it faces, from immigration to economic recovery and beyond. The issue of immigration is also closely tied to the question of national identity, a theme that Habib frequently returns to in his critique of Starmer. For many Britons, immigration raises fundamental questions about what it means to be British and how the country should define itself in the 21st century. Habib argues that Starmer's approach to immigration has failed to address these questions, instead offering a vision of the UK that is increasingly detached from its traditional values and identity. This, he suggests, is not only a strategic mistake, but also a betrayal of the principles that have historically defined British society.
The desperate plight of migrants seeking refuge in the United Kingdom has taken a harrowing turn in recent months.
Come here!
For Habib and those who share his views, the issue of national identity is not just about culture or tradition, but also about sovereignty and self-determination. The decision to leave the European Union was, for many, a statement of the UK's desire to reclaim control over its own destiny, free from external interference. However, Habib argues that Starmer's approach to immigration reflects a broader ambivalence towards this idea of sovereignty. By failing to take control of the UK's borders and address the concerns of British citizens, he argues, Starmer has undermined the very principles that Brexit was supposed to uphold. This critique is particularly resonant in the context of the ongoing debate about the future direction of the UK post-Brexit. For Habib, Brexit was not just about leaving the EU, but about charting a new course for the country, one that prioritizes national interests and reflects the will of the people. He argues that Starmer's leadership has failed to live up to this vision.
Prospect of 70,000 people being offered asylum out of that list of 100,000. What do you make of that?
Well, if they come from safe countries, they should simply be sent back.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a process because their countries are safe. Labour's at sixes and sevens with itself. It talks about the need to control illegal migration.
Instead, offering a diluted version of what Brexit was supposed to achieve. In this context, immigration becomes a litmus test for the broader question of whether the UK is truly taking back control or simply muddling through in the face of difficult challenges. Habib's focus on leadership and national identity also extends to his critique of the political establishment more broadly. He argues that the failure to address immigration effectively is symptomatic of a wider malaise within the political class, a tendency to prioritize political correctness and consensus over decisive action. This, he argues, has led to a situation where the concerns of ordinary citizens are sidelined in favor of an elite agenda.
So if you're a would-be people smuggler and you want to get around the legislation, well, the easiest way to do it is to pivot towards women and children coming across the channel. It also makes it much more difficult for the UK government optically to take, strong legal action if it's women and children coming across the channel. That's the first thing. And then, of course, as we all now know,
that is increasingly disconnected from the realities of everyday life. For Habib, the anti-immigration riots are a stark reminder of the dangers of this approach, a warning that unless the political class changes course, it risks losing the trust and support of the public. In this context, Habib calls for a new approach to leadership, one that is grounded in the principles of sovereignty, accountability, and a strong sense of national purpose. He argues that the UK needs leaders who are willing to make tough decisions and stand up for the interests of the country, even in the face of criticism or opposition. This, he suggests, is the only way to restore public trust and address the underlying issues that have fueled the recent wave of unrest. For Habib, the answer lies not in appeasement or compromise, but in a clear and unambiguous commitment to the values and principles that have historically defined the UK. Critics of Habib, however, argue that his approach is overly simplistic and risks exacerbating tensions rather than resolving them.
That given a number of people who arrive on Channel dinghies and arrive in the UK that we want to send back to France and elsewhere from where they came, in other Europe, many of them have already tried asylum claims across Europe before they've even got as far as France, let alone to the UK. What do you think the odds are that the number of people that the EU will assign to us as our fair, in quotes, allocation will be more or less than the number of people who we get to send back?
They suggest that the issue of immigration is far more complex than Habib acknowledges, involving a range of economic, social, and ethical considerations. They also argue that his focus on national identity and sovereignty risks alienating minority communities and undermining the social cohesion that is essential to the UK's long-term stability. For these critics, the answer lies not in a more restrictive approach to immigration, but in finding ways to manage it more effectively, in a manner that is fair, humane, and reflective of the UK's values as a diverse and inclusive society. In response to these criticisms, Habib argues that his approach is not about exclusion or intolerance, but about fairness and accountability. He contends that the current immigration system is not working for anyone, not for the migrants who often face exploitation and uncertainty, nor for the British citizens who feel that their concerns are being ignored. Habib's argument is that by taking a firmer stance on immigration, the government can create a system that is both more effective and more just, one that balances the rights of migrants with the needs of the host society and ensures that the benefits of immigration are shared more equitably. This vision of immigration reform is closely tied to Habib's broader political philosophy.
There were certain provisions which allowed the UK to send illegal migrants back to Europe, and we took illegal migrants from Europe. There was a kind of exchange. In the 4 years that the Dublin Agreement was in operation, the net returns was about a couple of hundred people. It came to no difference at all. It was just shuffling the deck.
Which emphasizes the importance of strong institutions, clear rules, and a sense of shared responsibility. He argues that the current approach to immigration has been undermined by a lack of clarity and consistency, leading to a system that is both inefficient and unfair. Habib calls for a more robust framework that is capable of managing immigration in a way that is transparent, predictable, and accountable. This, he suggests, would help to restore public confidence in the system and reduce the tensions that have led to the recent wave of unrest.
It doesn't deal with the illegal migration problem, but it's a really interesting question because it goes to the heart of many things in this country at the moment, including the reluctance of the government to give effect to a proper Brexit, which is that we seem to have defeated our ability domestically to pass laws and make policies for the United Kingdom that are good for the United Kingdom.
For Habib, the key to addressing the challenges of immigration lies in a return to the principles that have historically underpinned British governance. Principles such as the rule of law, individual responsibility, and a strong sense of community. He argues that these principles have been eroded in recent years, leading to a situation where the government is increasingly seen as detached from the concerns of ordinary citizens. By restoring these principles, Habib believes that the UK can create a more stable and cohesive society, one that is capable of managing the challenges of immigration and other issues in a way that is both fair and effective. At the heart of Habib's critique is a concern about the future direction of the UK.
The kind of migration we're now getting, both illegal and legal, by the way, is not of that caliber of individual. No. The caliber of individual is coming across the UK, illegal migrants obviously in particular, and just signing up as dependents. Why should they do work if they don't have to?
He argues that the current approach to immigration and other issues reflects a broader uncertainty about the country's identity and role in the world. For Habib, this uncertainty is dangerous because it creates a vacuum in which populism and extremism can flourish. He contends that without strong leadership and a clear sense of purpose, the UK risks drifting into a future that is increasingly uncertain and unstable. This, he argues, is why it is essential for the government to take a more decisive approach to issues like immigration. one that is grounded in a clear vision of the country's future and the values that should guide it. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us? Do you agree with Ben Habib's criticism of Keir Starmer? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.